Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, June 9th, 2017. Total and complete vindication for us. We said we would be on the air today, and so we are. I think this gives us basically license to do anything. Donald Trump is back on the air, I guess you would say. He's got his phone back, and I gotta tell you, lame response. I mean, he's 24 hours gone, and they obviously succeeded in either distracting him yesterday or more likely simply taking his phone away from him, convincing him that he could only do harm to his cause, whatever that might even be, by saying anything. And but they couldn't keep it away from him forever, or else he just went out and bought a new phone. That's a possibility too. And began tweeting this morning. And usually when he's himself, whatever that might mean, he usually starts out with the morning rage tweet storm, or he's not always angry, but really just like, what has he got? 2 tweets going on this morning. One basically saying, the total and complete vindication. He views yesterday's testimony from Comey as total and complete vindication, or that's the line they've settled on. That's what he wants to say about it. That's what he wants people to believe about it. I think he's extrapolating this from the idea that, well, we talked about it yesterday. Well, I said that he told me that I wasn't under investigation, and he testified similarly that he had said to me that I wasn't under investigation. Therefore, it's a total and complete vindication, ignoring, of course, all the rest of what was testified to. And, of course, there's nothing total or complete about it, et cetera, yada, yada, whatever. That's the line he wants to feed us. And then he let us know where he found out that it was total and complete vindication. Fox and Friends, which is what he watches every morning religiously, like Saturday morning cartoons for kids. He's got that. So great couch surfing, sir. Keep on couch potatoing, and good luck to you. I imagine since it's Friday, it's now 9 o'clock. You're preparing, having someone pack your bags, probably flying away to, I would think it's about time to get to Bedminster for the weekend, but you might be coming out my way and golfing in Virginia this weekend, doing it on the cheap, I guess. Time for another total and complete vacation. That's pretty much what he's looking for here. And the president's troops are out insisting that he is, in fact, vindicated. Kellyanne Conway, let's see, she's in the news today for time traveling back to 1988 to find some red Ray-Ban style sunglasses to wear on top of her head. I don't know what that is supposed to be about. She's in the news for whatever reason, for refusing to say if Trump-Comey tapes exist, which of course means nothing. I don't really know what to... the tapes is old stuff by now. If they exist, they vindicate Comey in all likelihood. If they don't exist, they vindicate everybody else in the world for laughing in the face of Donald Trump. He probably did tape things. He seems like the kind of guy who would be doing that. I don't know whether he tapes over old TV shows or not to do that. That might be something. We might, if it's on videotape, we might find something very disturbing. But, that he taped over from before. Maybe his visit to a Miss Universe pageant or a Miss Teen USA, something or other. Anyway, I don't know. Is it worth discussing Trump any further? I guess not if he's not actually going to tweet. We'll keep an eye out and see if he has anything else to say. But so far it's been pretty boring, which I think indicates to me that they're still insisting to him that he really needs to not say anything. Claim victory and walk away. Another victory out there, of course, he's going to have to get past the tabloid front pages in his hometown, ostensibly anyway, of New York. The Daily News just goes with a close-up of his bloated face with the word liar written across it, and usually what people think of when they think of total and complete vindication. And there's not much, there's no getting around that. I mean, there are no headlines anywhere that say he had a good day yesterday. And he was relatively silent, which is usually the best days he's got. Infrastructure Week coming to a close here today on Friday, thankfully. We're just about done with that. They still think it is Infrastructure Week, and they have they put out a one-pager with some bullet points about what they think they're getting done on their Infrastructure Week. But it's, again, crazy, nonsense, non-committal about everything. Oh, we're going to invest a bunch of money and do a bunch of things and call that the week. So, I don't know. Anybody who finds out whether or when the president is taking off for his vacation, please let me know. And if you want to redirect the show at any point or at least inject something into the conversation, don't forget our Kagro in the morning hashtag. It's easy, KITM. We use the I in this. It's not, we use the T. KM wouldn't work. Kagro morning? No. Kagro in the morning. Send me anything that might be on your mind. We could always use it. There's plenty of stories to review, of course, but without the president going crazy, I feel like, I don't know, I'm at a loss. Anyway, let's see. There's other things we can cover yesterday. Yes, Bill in Portland, Maine with his morning tweet letting everybody know. It says, he's asking whether or not I can translate John McCain's Comey hearing babble into English. I don't think so. I did not watch the proceedings live, as you remember, at least from 10 to 11 when I was with you on here. Armando was watching it and then drifting off. That's okay. It was compelling viewing, no doubt. But, by the time things finally wound up, I guess John McCain had to turn at the microphone, and I don't know what happened, but, Twitter was essentially issuing a silver alert, as far as I could tell, on John McCain. Like, he was babbling and going on. I saw more people asking, is he okay? Is he having a stroke? Should someone bring him to the doctor after the hearing adjourns? So I didn't see it, and I never went back to look either. I imagine it's total nonsense. He appeared, from what I could gather from the Twitter descriptions, to be trying to draw some kind of a parallel between the investigations of Hillary Clinton and her emails and Benghazi and the whole thing, and these Trump-related investigations, and trying to get around to the conclusion that it somehow was indicative of bias on James Comey's part, that he had concluded and closed the Hillary Clinton investigation. She is, of course, at the moment, alleged not to be the president of the United States. Whereas he has continued to investigate the campaign and other close associates of Donald Trump, who does maintain that he is the president of the United States at the moment. And no word on whether an investigation has opened directly on him yet either, but, that's not worth much either. But I think McCain was trying to say, well, you closed the investigation on Hillary Clinton, but you're opening an investigation of Donald Trump. How is that fair? And everybody was just like, do you need a moment? Is there something wrong? Is another cup of coffee the answer? Is a CT scan what we need here? What's happening here? We shouldn't be losing our footing here. Don't lose our time. This is like the golden hour where we can do the most good about what might be happening with you and your brain at that. He was out of it, apparently. So if you saw it live and you have a description you want to share with us, by all means, pick up the Twitter machine and let us know. Email, of course, works as well, but it's a lot harder to check email during the middle of the show. Let's see, other things. Something else occurred to me as I was thinking about the McCain reaction, and not quick enough to write notes about that. But all right, let's see. Let's run over to, we've got, of course, Daily Kos. This is, of course, Daily Kos Radio. Perhaps you're not reading for whatever reason. DailyKos.com, the main flagship publication of our sprawling media empire. If not, you should be. I got the sense every once in a while I get the sense that there are perhaps, it's hard to believe, but perhaps a couple of people who maybe have stumbled upon us either on their radio, that's entirely possible, in the Washington, D.C. area, and in the Rochester, New York area as well. You know what? For all I know, it's happening all over the place. It's very difficult to monitor who's stealing what these days. But those are the two authorized radio outlets who have actually approached us and asked our permission, as is proper with these things. And we hope there will be more of them in the future. And we invite you, by the way, if you have a progressive radio station in your area that is lacking for excellent morning content, or is lacking for excellent content in the afternoons and doesn't mind playing a tape from the morning, you might check in with them and, hey, recommend the Kagro in the Morning Show, because what have we got to lose? Nothing, right? Okay. Well, let's see. Let me hop on over, though. Both I've got Daily Coast as an option, and, of course, as always, a ton of articles in Pocket. And you know what I have here? This is actually kind of an interesting bit here that I thought might be worth sharing. Let me see if I can find the thing. I had, did I not put it in Pocket? I was pretty certain that I did, but that's another ongoing drama on this show. My struggle to actually get things filed in Pocket properly, and it doesn't seem to be coming up. So I'm going to run back to Twitter where I saw it. Greg pointed this one out to me. Greg is constantly combing through Daily Coast looking for interesting things to talk about, just like me. And I'm combing through that and the wider news world as well. This is this is interesting. He found this in, those of you who are Daily Coast readers will recognize, of course, the top comments feature. Just a community feature in which they round up the best comments to the stories and diaries of the day, and all sorts of other great stuff. Just a nice place to sit back and enjoy your fellow community members and their creativity and the aplomb with which they comment on the day's events. How about that? I'll just throw another vocabulary word in there for you. Brillig put this together, top comments, Convention Report Edition. This goes back to way back. This is like Throwback Tuesday, all the way back to June 6th, 2017. That's old in news terms. But in addition to the top comments roundup, a report from Brillig on a trip to, as a first-time delegate, to the Massachusetts Democratic Party Platform Convention last Saturday. And it's a nice roundup of what it was like and what the experience was all about and how it was getting together with so many other Democrats and progressives in a Democratic and progressive state and putting together the state party's platform and just the mechanics of how it works and what it's like to show up as a delegate. And Greg found this bit. In addition to this fantastic description, here's a fantastic story. It's fantastic because I'm in it. I can't hide it. But what a great, you should hear it. I should tell it to you. That way you would hear it. How about that? Here's this. So, in addition to description of what it's like to get to the place and these sorts of descriptions of participating at the higher levels of party organizing. I really love these. I appreciate these, of course, because they give people a better understanding of the procedure, but I mean the procedure from top to bottom, where people say, even if they study up on the rules and say, I'm prepared for this convention, what's it really like? What's it like dragging yourself to the convention? I appreciate when you get these top to bottom descriptions. There's a paragraph in here about, well, the convention is in Worcester, I guess is how they would pronounce that up there in Massachusetts. It's Worcester to anybody who's spelling it out. If you're in the spelling bee, but if you're in the spelling bee, they won't ask you that way. They'll ask you spell Worcester. Perhaps they might. Anyway, it's about 90 minutes away, Brillig says, from home. So just okay. Well, I set off at 7 a.m. for doors opening at 8, gaveling in at 10. Parking was easy. Walk from the parking lot to the door marked for delegates who already have their credentials. And then there's a long line, and there was even a long line for breakfast. all of this stuff that really, you know, it's peripheral to the story about participating in a convention, but I love it. It gives people a clear view of what's it going to take to get involved, and I think that's always wise. Anyway, the real reason that I'm doing this story, not just because of the fantastic description of what went on at the convention, but because this next paragraph says, funny anecdote from the entry line, waiting online to get in the door with your credentials. I had my Netroots Nation canvas bag with me with Daily Kos logos on it. I got to talking to a delegate next to me, and he noticed the Daily Kos logo, which, not surprising, right? I mean, it's one of the most widely read progressive blogs in the country. Clearly, at the Democratic State Convention in Massachusetts, there's going to be plenty of Daily Kos readers. That I expected. This part I did not. So this guy sees the Netroots Nation bag with Daily Kos logos on it, and he turns to Brillig and says, "Do you know about Daily Kos Radio?" So this is like a life goal here for me, that you know, out there in the wider world, that somebody might turn to somebody else without a radio present, without a computer open, you know, with a laptop with the browser open to Daily Kos or even Daily Kos Radio, to just simply ask that, or to see the Daily Kos logo and say, "What about radio?" Amazing. It's like I paid the guy. Brillig says, "Yes, I did," which is also amazing. I think we knew that for a fact, but it's nice to have it happen, have people say yes. And, so, yes, but Brillig's answer goes on, "Yes, I do know about Daily Kos Radio, and I've known the hosts as writers and had met them at prior Netroots Nations," which is always nice to have people remember. And the response was great. "Oh my God, you have? You've met Kagro X? Can you believe that?" They're referring to me with that name. That's pretty amazing. And I swear he swooned, Brillig says. "I thanked him for listening and told him if he really likes it, to make sure to support it financially." And what could there be a better answer? I think, Brillig, why don't you come on here and just take the show from here? And as a thank you, I hope to God that more people are saying this in their lines, whether they're waiting for ice cream or 2 scoops or 1, depending on whether you're president or not. Or waiting to get into their Democratic National Conventions or their state conventions or anything. I just thought, thank you for passing that anecdote on. It was something that I was able to tell my family. I tell my kids are dumbfounded. What? That's stupid. Why would anybody say that? It's not stupid. They like it. What's wrong with you? They're fans of your dad. Be happy. It doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't work with kids. It's never going to. They're teenagers and pre-teenagers. They don't believe that their dad's worth a damn except for a ride here and there. And, I need the new video game. You got to buy me that. P.S. My pants don't fit anymore. Can you get me some of those? And, I don't know. Bring me a snack. You got any Bugles? My kids don't eat Bugles. This is the most ludicrous snack. Bugles and Funyuns. Thank God they don't, like that stuff. I'd be embarrassed to buy that at the supermarket for whatever reason. All right. Well, there's other news out there besides the fact that other people are listening to this show and talking about it online for entry into the Massachusetts State Party Platform Convention, although I'm totally impressed with myself. And thank you very much, Brillig, for passing that story on. It's inspirational, and nothing could be better than nothing could be better than you reminding people that it's something you want to support financially. And how do you do that? In case you've somehow managed to miss all of this, and I do a terrible job at promoting it, but the truth is that your donations keep the show going. It gives me an excuse to, when I turn to my family and say, see, people are interested in listening to this. People are interested in supporting it. We can, perhaps, with a little bit more support, make a permanent employment style go of it on this for me, for one thing. I put an awful lot of time into it, and I'd like to be able to compensate better Scott Anderson, who puts in a couple hours each day summarizing the day's show so that it's available for you if you heard something on the air that you particularly were interested in, wanted to get a hold of, a link to the articles that we discussed or read about, or that I had made some assertion or another on the air and hadn't offered evidence. I very often will try and back that up with a link. And Scott helps make that possible while still allowing me to, say, take time to eat lunch or get up from the computer. And sadly, we're not a multi-million-dollar operation, and I can't pay him what he's worth there. But, of course, I can't pay myself what I like to think I'm worth, too. You can help us do that, of course. And by visiting Patreon.com, that's the easiest way of doing it, Patreon. Become a patron through Patreon, get it? Patreon.com/KagroX will bring you to my page. Of course, if you forget that for whatever reason, but you remember Patreon, you can search us up. Search us up as Kagro, KagroX, Kagro in the Morning, David Waldman, Daily Coast Radio. Pretty much any of them will bring you to the right page. And Patreon offers you a pretty simple way, secure transactions, etc. Use your credit card, sign up for a monthly contribution to help keep us going. And we ask that you throw in a couple of bucks a month. And that if everyone who's listening, and remember, we have something in the neighborhood of 4,500 to 5,000 people downloading the show each day, and if everyone was throwing a couple of spare coins even per show, we'd be in the money, and we'd be proud to tell people that we host Daily Coast Radio and that it's a real vocation. And Scott could get what his time is really worth. That would also be helpful. Anyway, if you're not into the whole monthly deduction from a credit card thing, and you'd like to either just make a one-time donation, I'd put $5 in a jar for you, or I'd do it a month at a time, but I just would rather have one charge and be done with it. Square Cash. Square they're the guys that provide the back end for mobile sales all over the place. The little actual Square cubish, really, device that you can plug into your smartphone, and it's a credit card reader. And they built this whole thing out. The Square Cash Me function, also easily found on our posts at Daily Coast as well, that point you to where you can go to make your donations. That'll give you the opportunity to do it one time, or hey, you could do it 2, 3, 4 times if you feel like it. Another easy way of handling that transaction. The Square Cash account can be found by going to HTTPS. It's secure, right? So basically, that internet thing, cash.me, cash.me / and then they use this weird protocol, $Kagro. It's very easy to use, very easy to type in, but even easier than that, find any one of our morning posts or our summary posts in the afternoon, and right underneath the embedded player for the day's show, you'll find links to both the Square Cash and Patreon links, and it gets easier from there. Anyway, let's cast that aside and get back to the news that everybody's really talking about, besides when they're in line to get into their conventions. James Comey's testimony yesterday. We're not done with it yet, and neither is Armando. Good morning.
Oh, yeah,
Armando.
I don't know how much you talked about it already. I apologize.
Oh, no, I haven't yet. I've been going on and on about how somebody was, how Brillig met somebody online to get into the Massachusetts State Party Platform Convention, and the person said, "Hey, do you ever listen to Daily Coast Radio?" Like out of the blue, basically, to that. He had seen the Netroots Nation and Daily Coast branded canvas bag that Brillig had, and but went straight to the radio section, which is pretty amazing. We're making inroads.
Well, we should. Well done. Well deserved.
Woo.
Yes. And yes, make a donation, because not just because I talk, mostly because David talks about any number of things in ways and with expertise and knowledge that, frankly, you'll not find anywhere else. That's just a fact. I mean, it's not bragging when it's true, right, David?
I think it can be both. However, It's warranted. How about that? If it's true.
It's warranted.
As
and that's
opposed to
true.
Kim
and
Basinger is dying to date me.
I'll give listeners one example. There is now a process going forward on a health care bill in the Senate. All the procedural ins and outs of what that means is something that, frankly, you're not going to get a cogent and understandable explanation of that anywhere else. And I've looked.
It's hard to find. Even Vox won't help you. I mean, they'll tell you this is an explainer, but it's usually like, because of the Byzantine Senate rules, XYZ happened. Well, what are those rules, and why are they Byzantine, and are they really? And did the Byzantine people resent that? I don't know.
Yes, exactly. What is it that the Byzantines meant? But that's just one example of why this is an essential service that Daily Kos is providing and why you should support it. So enough plugging. Let me get back to something that you actually get anywhere, but I like to talk about it. So David's kind enough to let me do it, which is what about Comey?
What about that guy?
Now, what about that guy? Apparently he's a leaker.
Yes. Anybody who says anything about Donald Trump as a leaker, remember, he thinks everyone he ever meets is under a non-disclosure agreement. He didn't get one out of this guy, but that's his usual definition. That's
a new piece of news, so I do want to address that first.
All right.
Before I get to bloviate about what it all means, what yesterday all means. This morning it's announced that Trump's personal lawyer, not the White House counsel, Trump's personal lawyer,
yes,
Mark Kasowitz, he of the fairly shoddy office work with misspellings and double words in his statement.
Got his pocket square right, though.
Yeah, well, no, that's what matters, I suppose, to some. But this morning it's announced he's going to file with the Inspector General of the Department of Justice a complaint against one James B. Comey, former director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, for leaking.
Yeah, really interesting. What happens when the Inspector General says, we have jurisdiction over Department of Justice employees?
Well, let's bend over backwards and talk about it. The memos, I guess, is what he's talking about in the conversations. Now, there's no claim, nor could there be claims of classified information with regard to either the memos or the conversations with the president. Can Comey discuss non-classified information with the president? In my view, absent a valid invocation of executive privilege, I'm not sure what the argument is here by Mr. Trump's personal lawyer. What is he claiming? That the president has, as you said, a non-disclosure agreement? Well, he kind of does. It's called the executive privilege. There are various iterations of the privilege. There's obviously the national security privileges, the deliberative. The main one you think of is the deliberative process privilege.
Could it be that he was deliberating, should I obstruct justice? What do you think, Jim?
Now, could you make a case there? Not really, but I think it's frankly simpler than that. I really do. And that is this. From the podium of the White House press spokesman's room there in the White House, one Sarah Huckabee Sanders, speaking for the White House and for the President of the United States, announced to the world that the President will not invoke executive privilege with regard to James Comey.
Well, she did say that at one point.
It's waived. That's it. It's over.
Oh.
In my opinion, if you announce to the world that they're not claiming executive privilege, the former FBI director, has every right to rely on that. Secondly, there was no doubt what Mr. Comey was going to discuss in his testimony.
No, I guess not. After he published it on Wednesday night, certainly.
Well, the Senate committee published it at Mr. Comey's request, but it was the Congress of the United States that published it.
Yes. Leakers.
If there was a claim of executive privilege, it should have been made then. It wasn't. Yeah. So then you go to me, the third point. What is the content of these communications? Which is the point you've started with. And it's a fair one. Being a lawyer, I start with the ones that are slam dunk. They waived it. There's nothing to talk about. And of course, there's the fourth one that is the president himself tweeted about these conversations.
Yes.
So he sort of waived the privilege there. And you'll see that's going to be an issue with regard to the current director of Central Intelligence and the National Security Agency, who didn't want to talk about their conversations with the president because, well, we just don't think it's right. So, well, that's not how it works. If you're going to claim executive privilege, you don't get to claim it. The president has to claim it.
The executive does it.
Yes, the actual executive does the claiming, and the president didn't.
I'm the only thing that jumps out at me is that this administration, this president, I guess, has a history of speaking out on his own behalf and insisting, don't listen to anybody else, listen to me. So, I mean, I guess if he's really stuck, he could say, yeah, my official spokesperson saying I was going to waive executive privilege isn't real. You got to listen to me. I didn't say I was going to waive it. She made that up.
Let me reverse that.
If
that's the case, then the only way for him to assert it is for him to say, I'm saying Comey can't testify.
Yeah.
Which was the opposite of what they wanted to do, obviously.
And they had every opportunity to do it. And he's also, by the same token, used Twitter daily to insist that this is my direct line to people. This is the one they can't take away from me. This is when I want people to know something that's coming from my head, unfiltered. I use this. So in that case, we had like a week of silence from him about executive privilege.
It comes to a different point. Now, you're talking about Twitter. He sort of commented on it. I don't know that necessarily is a full-on waiver. But if it goes forward, and I'm very skeptical it will go forward, there is an announced press conference in the White House or the Rose Garden, I forget exactly where the president is supposedly going to have a press conference at 2:45 p.m. today.
Not London. He's not going to the UK, as he threatened earlier in the week.
No, it would have been beyond a disaster for the Tories, which is another big story.
Right.
But the reality is, we know Trump. I'm not calling him the president anymore. We know Trump. And the chances that he's not going to comment on each and every one of his conversations with Comey is nil, which will constitute another waiver of executive privilege.
Yes. If you spill it, it's out there.
It's out there. That you don't get to say what I want and then say nobody else can talk executive privilege. No, you talked about it. It's over. And this was an issue for, as I said before, for the director of Central Intelligence and the NSA director, when they tried to characterize how they felt about the conversations and then didn't want to take any more questions on it. It doesn't work that way. This is a very common phrase lawyers know, which is you can't use it as a shield and a sword. If it's privilege, it's privilege. You don't get to put in the parts you like and keep out the parts you don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's just the way it works. So it's laughable, but it goes to show you where, they kept him off Twitter all yesterday, but that's falling apart. Now they have crazy Kasowitz of threatening libel suits and everything. Now, look, Kasowitz isn't crazy, and I'm sure he's a competent lawyer in his field. Or maybe he's not, but let's assume for the sake of argument he is. He's not a criminal lawyer.
Got a pocket square.
He's got a pocket square, but he's not a criminal lawyer, and he doesn't really understand government issues either. That's not what he does or hasn't done. So you just get this guy because Trump trusts him for whatever reason, mainly because he does whatever he tells him to do. I mean, that's, how Trump is. He demands loyalty, and that's how he determines your competence. If you're loyal, then you're good.
This lawyer, like Trump, is fond of saying he's going to sue everybody for everything. I'm going to sue this guy. I'm going to sue the women who are accusing me. I'm going to sue you. So, and he loves to do that.
And I'm always like mentioning the fact that his law partner is one Joe Lieberman. That's always fun for me to say. So maybe Joe Lieberman will be his lawyer and start doing things. I mean, that'll be fun. I think that would be perfect, to be honest with you. I think Joe Lieberman's nadir would be acting as Trump's lawyer. That would be fun for me and fun for Lieberman haters all over the world, I believe.
I think so.
You're right. So there's that. More ridiculousness, and frankly, the spiral, I think, only begins now. Comey, to go back to Comey is Comey. Remember my prediction, and I think it was accurate, other than John McCain, Comey decided what he wanted to say. He took every question and said what he wanted to say to it. James Comey determined what was said in that hearing. Every single word, he knew what he wanted to say. He said it the way he wanted to say. Some of the questioners, weren't terrible, but there was nothing particularly good or bad about questioning here because Comey just did whatever he wanted. Again, with the notable exception of John McCain, who doddered into senility yesterday in an almost embarrassing display.
Apparently pretty sad looking.
I was, when I left you yesterday, and because I had to go, I was actually headed to a funeral.
Oh.
And I had to drive a few hours for the funeral. So, but I was listening on Sirius to the hearings, and I got to McCain's part. And I didn't know who it was. I don't know what that sound was, but yeah.
that was...
that was me. Oh, that was me before.
When you were talking to me on the phone at one point.
I didn't know it was McCain, but if I had known it was because I was listening to, who is the senator? My God, what an embarrassing, doddering fool.
Him. Oh, jeez. Yeah, that was...
And then I found out it was McCain. It was like, what? Gee, no, seriously, he's clearly passed.
There was a great collection of photos of other senators' reactions as he was rambling, like, from eye rolls to like head burying and like, oh my God, someone get him out of here. It was very interesting to see to watch people watch him go on and for nobody to like pull him out of there or anything. That was another aspect. I'll let you.
No one caught his eye to say, hey, just stop.
Right.
But McCain's McCain. He thinks, he's got a lot of Comey in him. They think they walk on water.
Yeah, look, I prefer people who are coherent. That's just me.
It was an embarrassing performance. I figured it was what's that Texas guy's name? The congressman, the crazy...
Oh, Louis Gohmert?
Louis Gohmert. I mean, it was... maybe Louis Gohmert's more coherent than that was. That was... Look, we don't have to rehash it. If you heard it, you know what I'm talking about. The rest of it was amazing in the two things. Comey, to me, two main takeaways. Comey called him a liar at every single opportunity. He did not have to do that. Remember when we talked before, I said, why did you take notes? Why did you start taking memos on January 6th?
Yeah.
What happened? And he said, in essence, and he said a few things, but the essence of it is because Trump is a liar, and I thought this might be something I needed in the future.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what he said.
That's the same thing that Trump's own lawyers have said about him. That's the story about you can't be alone. You can't do a deposition with him as his lawyer alone. A deposition or negotiating a contract for your services. There's nothing you can do without a witness.
And, that's why in some ways maybe Comey's objection to one-on-one wasn't so much the impropriety as I need a witness.
Yeah. Oh, that's exactly what it was. And he had just seen Mr. Naive Beginner President, as Paul Ryan would have it, send everybody out of the room. Because he knew right off the bat. I mean, he's not new to trying to skirt justice or the rules or the regulations or the law or the ordinances or whatever, the building codes. And he knows enough not to leave witnesses hanging around. And it seemed clear enough, it certainly wasn't made explicit, but it seemed pretty clear to me that everybody who was asked to leave the room also knew why they were being asked to leave the room.
Now Comey thinks that gives him a lot of confidence. What I think is interesting about it is Comey doesn't know that I think Jeff Sessions and Jared Kushner and whoever else was there who was asked to leave the room are perfectly capable, in my view, of lying and saying, that never happened.
Right.
Then what,
ice cream right there.
Mr. Sanctimonious Halo Head, Comey? Because, I think Comey... he pulls some punches. There was one thing in particular which I thought he was, frankly, way out of bounds in his conclusions, which is, what would have happened if you killed the Flynn investigation? Would that have stopped the Russia investigation? And he said, said, at that point in the investigation, how would he even know? He really should have said, I had no way of knowing. But he said, well, only if I could have flipped them, which I thought was sort of a threat. But I think that, again, he was wrong in that you don't know. You have not received a single statement from Flynn. How do you know what ending the Flynn investigation would have meant? So I don't agree with that statement at all. I think that by and large it was devastating for Trump because Comey came across, because he does play the G-man to a T. He's very good at it. And once he got into his groove, he was very effective in, frankly, painting Trump as completely – he didn't paint him as crazy. He painted him as a liar and a cheat. And someone that he doesn't doubt for a second was trying to commit obstruction of justice.
Yeah, and he did a pretty good job. The Bob Ross of painting that picture. The Rembrandt.
Not that it's hard, but, people dance around it in those things. And that seemed to be his main purpose.
Yes.
To say, look, Trump's a liar. And Trump was trying to obstruct justice here. And I know because I took it as an order. I ignored the order. And when I ignored the order, I got fired.
Yes. That opens up a whole other area of inquiry here, but I think I'll hold on to it for a moment. I'll let you finish your thought, unless that was our conclusion.
No. That's exactly where I was going.
Okay.
So, without jumping into the particulars, because I actually don't have much time again today, but I wanted to just give you quick impressions on that. I'm sure you had your own once you had a chance to see it and listen. But I think it's a tough day, and the tough day starts with now, in a way, Trump's insistent on pushback. If he, in a way, it's the best strategy for Trump is to not even engage this argument. Just go on and do infrastructure events and
I was expecting that.
All the other normal political lies that he tells. But he's going to get in the mud because he's Donald Trump. That's what he knows. He's going to be, he started tweeting again this morning. And I think he's going to keep tweeting, and I think he's going to escalate the fight. And I do believe that this is going to lead to weeks and weeks of Trump versus Comey.
Well, I hope so, because so far he's losing it badly. And Comey did set it up nicely by saying, look, this is or I guess somebody asked him, essentially, why should we believe you over, well, he said the president.
Yes.
And I know you don't want to say that anymore. And the answer was, well, look at the track records that we've
exactly.
got. And
one guy lies about everything.
Man,
I haven't been found to have lied about anything, and that's true. He hasn't been found. He's made mistakes, some factual mistakes in his testimony, but there's no deliberate lying that anybody can point to.
And he's made some errors in judgment, as we've pointed out as well. But the idea that his track record doesn't stack up beautifully against most people, probably, but, like you said, the G-man image, but certainly against Donald Trump. Donald Trump actually has a reputation as a inveterate liar about anything.
And everything.
Yeah. As I'm very fond of pointing out, other people are saying, well, what about when he said this and that and the other, and it's all political stuff, and that's all most relevant, absolutely, and it's certainly fresh in people's minds that he lied about those things. But to me, the most damning thing is this is the guy who pretended to be somebody else, who was working as a PR flack for Donald Trump. He didn't even bother to disguise his voice, and his job was to call gossip columnists and tell them that he was dating the most beautiful women, and they were all after him, and the most gorgeous actresses and celebrities all want Donald Trump, who is not me, but rather my boss, and he can't walk down the street without having his pants torn off by gorgeous women.
That's why Donald Trump never goes to trial in cases, because the cross-examination of Donald Trump would be one of the most satisfyingly entertaining things you could imagine. Go through every lie he's ever told.
Yeah, it would be pretty disastrous, which is why they avoid trial whenever they can, despite the fact that he said, I never settle. I just run away. I don't
think he's ever gone to trial, so clearly he does settle every time.
Yeah,
just
it's very rare.
just for the record.
He settles quite frequently. Yes, that's
he
true.
has never testified in open court.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I've seen lots of depositions with him, and he's plenty uncomfortable.
That's a different thing. A deposition is, in a conference room, et cetera, et cetera. He's never tested, and people.
He comes off terribly.
And he gets away with, I don't remember. I don't know.
I have a great brain.
It's the value is what I think it is. That kind of nonsense.
All of that, and all the other stuff that's documented from his books. I call his own version of the truth about whether or not he tells the truth. He says, I use, what did he call it? Truthful hyperbole.
Yeah, truthful hyperbole.
It's a confessed lie.
Honest loyalty.
Yeah, right, sure. All these things. Yeah, so, if you can do that, and like we pointed out again when we brought this up the other day, it wasn't something he did as a teenager. I have a girlfriend, she lives in Canada, you wouldn't know her. Instead, he's calling the gossip column. He's 45 years old. Madonna wants to have sex with me. Kim Basinger can't keep her hands off me. I have 3 girlfriends, right now, even as I'm married to Marla Maples at the time. And I told her to get lost because I don't even care because I got like 3 gorgeous girls with me at all times. And, he does. He has them, not me. I'm John Barron.
Not me, him.
Yeah.
Donald Trump.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, you're all right. You're all correct in everything you say, and I think that's his problem now for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Anyway, I actually do have to run. I apologize.
No, you don't.
I did want to give you a quick shot of what I wanted to tell people what I thought about Comey.
I needed to get. It was good to give us our footing. It was a fun time talking about the convention and things that are going on in my house, but it was time to get to the news.
No. That's also fun too. Howard Stern always said the secret to his success is willingness to talk about his own wife.
Yes, and how. So.
And how. All right.
I won't do that. Not to that extent.
We'll talk next week. Have a good weekend.
Okay. Thanks very much, Armando. Take it easy. Enjoy your weekend. And we'll see what kind of craziness the Trump Twitter stream brings us for Monday. In the meantime, a couple of things, I guess, just to wrap up a little bit about yesterday's Comey testimony. I was struck by a couple of things, and I think eventually everybody had it sink in that the Republican line of questioning seemed to be focusing on they were looking to chip away at Comey's credibility by insisting, well, if he was so terrible, if the president was so awful and was ordering you to obstruct justice and you clearly wouldn't have anything to do with that, why did you stay in the meeting? Why didn't you say, no, this is inappropriate and I will not do it? Why didn't you walk out? Why did you continue to accept personal, or private phone calls from him? Which, I don't know what to tell you. Your phone rings, you pick it up, and it's Donald Trump. And all you can say is you need to be calling, at that point, I think, the Deputy Attorney General, because the Attorney General is supposedly recused from this case. I can't talk to you about that. Well, why did you accept that phone call? Because, I don't know, the phone rang, and I picked it up, and I said, hello, and hello, it's Donald Trump. And then I said, you got to call somebody else. That's not accepting a phone call. Anyway, the whole thrust of it was, of course, very familiar and should have reminded everybody that, this is what you do. I don't mean to draw any kind of a parallel between what happened with Comey and Trump and the actual serious physical tort and crime of rape or sexual assault. But this is, I only point this out that this happens all the time. People are constantly asking people, the victims of sexual assaults, particularly where they knew the attacker, why did you continue to spend time with that person? Or it doesn't even have to be sexual assault. It can just be harassment of any kind, really, in the office setting. Even also, well, if there was so much sexual harassment going on, why didn't you quit the job? And, I don't know, it was sort of amazing to see that same sort of ignorance on display. And it doesn't really translate anyway, because being the director of the FBI isn't exactly the same thing as being a subordinate in an office or it's not like your job prospects are the same as the however many years he spent as director of the FBI, and he's been such a high-ranking official in the Justice Department. His job prospects are pretty good were he to leave this job or be fired from it, although I see he hasn't accepted a new job yet. But that's probably a function of the fact that he's wrapped up in this thing. But how could you? I mean, it's not nearly the same thing as being anybody in any regular office job. Even a high-ranking officer of a company really doesn't have exactly the same kind of luxury as somebody like Jim Comey does. But anyway, I found it kind of fascinating, and I also found it fascinating that they all imply in this line of questioning that I wouldn't stand for this stuff, or if I see something going wrong, I stand up and say something right away. And it's like, it's been 150 days that you've known that Donald Trump didn't belong in the presidency, and you haven't said a goddamn thing. So not only that, but just 5 minutes ago, you saw your colleague John McCain rambling on and clearly having some sort of senior moment there. And you said nothing. You grimaced and you groaned and you rocked in your chair and you rolled your eyes, but nobody found a way to put an end to this because you were just stunned and surprised, which is exactly what Comey said was happening with him. But yeah, really, the real takeaway I thought from all of that was not only that even before you get to their line of questioning about why didn't you do something, I found probably, I guess, a better takeaway that actually has more relevance, more applicability to situations where we're talking about sexual assault or sexual harassment is when Comey, who is, by all accounts, I just said it, a very powerful person and somebody in a position such that they really don't have to harbor the same kind of fears that your, everyday office worker has to worry about if I lose my job, what will I do? It could be years before I find work again, for all I know. And he doesn't really have that issue. Still, though, the idea of being stunned and temporarily, rendered incapable of not rational thought, but afterwards, with the distance between yourselves of time, between the event and your reflection on it, you come to your senses and say, I should have said this or I should have walked away. We've all had those moments. But we've all also had moments where we're stunned into silence or inaction because we can't believe what's going on, and it doesn't pose a clear physical danger to us sometimes right away. And sometimes it does. I mean, when in the context of sexual assault, it certainly can, but it doesn't always immediately at that particular moment either. People are frozen like, is this guy kidding? Is this just, flirting gone badly wrong because he's socially inept? Am I too sensitive to this? Or even when it's clear, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening to me. And maybe you're looking for the exits, but you're not stabbing the guy in the eyeball or anything. I mean, it's a pretty natural reaction. And I think the fact that as powerful a figure, and remember, he's like 6 foot, 500 inches tall, that a guy like that who's in a position of power and a position of authority and no real serious fears about, I'll never work again either. I imagine he could walk into almost any top law firm he wants and say, yeah, I'll take the corner office. Thank you. And, even so, as a person with considerable clout, he still spends time stunned. Like, I don't even know what to say. And also, what do you say to Donald Trump? Is there anything you can do that you think would sink in with Trump that wouldn't make the situation immediately worse? Probably not. So you just say, I'm not in any physical danger with Donald Trump as the FBI director. You're in physical danger with Donald Trump perhaps as a Miss Universe contestant, but not as an FBI director. So you just say, I think I can survive this situation, and when I get out of here, I'm going to write a memo. That's what drives you to write a memo. You get out of there and you immediately realize, wow, that was a situation where I really, if I could do that one over again, I wish I could do that now, but I can't. So instead, I'll live it again and write a memo about it. Everybody's got to know about this. Eventually, I'm going to need this as evidence. So I found that pretty interesting as a takeaway from the day's events. All right, let's see. We have some comments that came in a little bit before Armando joined us, so let's catch up with everybody. Just by way of random comments, and Bill saying, here's something worth discussing as well. A new Atlanta Journal-Constitution poll. John Ossoff down in Georgia's 6th District, where we have the special election coming up in, what are we talking about, like 2 weeks? John Ossoff opens up a 7-point lead over Handel in Georgia's 6th District, 51-44, which is rather astounding. If the election were held today, that would be great. But it isn't being held today, of course, and there's all kinds of opportunities for things to go wrong, so we just hope that he can hold on and pull off this upset. Still plenty of opportunity to get involved, and of course, if you live in Georgia's 6th District, by all means, or nearby, or know someone else who does, make sure that they get to the polls. And love to pull that one off. That would be fantastic score coming up in about 2 weeks here. What else? We have Karen pointing out, let's see, I think McCain's later explanation of his episode, let's say, was what his point was. Not the explanation of his episode was, I stayed up too late watching an Arizona Diamondbacks baseball game, which I don't even think was on that late. I don't know, but okay, fine, whatever. I mean, if you're getting thrown off that badly by the baseball, there's things you can do about it. But maybe this was his first indication that he's not all that he used to be. Anyway, this is Karen's idea of what McCain was trying to get around to, was that his complaint was that Comey had reached legal conclusions in order to close the investigation and exonerate Clinton. Why are you not doing that now with Trump? And it's a thing. You can ask that question. There are answers to that question, but he couldn't seem to formulate it. That still makes, she says, it still makes my head hurt when I try to parse this stuff out for sense, and I could see that. That does sound like what he might have been trying to get around to, but again, it's just sort of an easily addressable. It would have been fine if he had had the opportunity to address it. I don't know if Comey was able to make sense of it, but I mean, if you're at a certain stage of the investigation, and by the way, I guess he probably would have said, well, one of the difficulties here is, although maybe this does draw a parallel, one of the difficulties in the Clinton situation was that the official that he might otherwise have deferred to in reaching a legal conclusion, the Attorney General, was somebody that he had reason to believe would create political difficulties for themselves, for everyone else involved, and for himself, Comey, if he left the decision to her. Why? Because he had, of course, the memo or the whatever it was, the emails that he says now that he knew then to be fake, but was worried that America wouldn't recognize them as fake, and he would have to explain. He's very upset about the prospect of having to explain things to people, apparently. But you know what we're talking about. We talked about this story the other day, that there was a fake email that appeared to create an insurmountable conflict of interest for the Attorney General, then Attorney General Loretta Lynch. And he, even though he knew it not to be true, he wasn't sure whether everybody in America would agree, and he really was looking for a way to keep the task of reaching that legal conclusion out of her hands for everybody else's sake. And for whatever reason, he decided it would fall to him. Why it wouldn't fall to a deputy attorney general, I don't know. In this situation, of course, if he were to defer to the attorney general to reach this conclusion, that wouldn't work either, because he's supposedly recused from this situation. But again, why not leave it he could leave it to the Deputy Attorney General, and seems to be interested in doing that. And it might have been a legitimate question for McCain to say, why is it that you were unwilling to leave the question of finding a legal conclusion to the Deputy Attorney General of the Obama administration with regard to Hillary Clinton, but here, rather than do the same thing and step in and say everybody's hopelessly compromised, you're going to leave it to this Deputy Attorney General. You had that option with Clinton and you didn't exercise it. Why won't you exercise it here? And I'm sure that's probably explainable as well. And one excuse might very well simply be, I don't think that this Deputy Attorney General has the same conflicts. I don't know. I mean, who was the Deputy Attorney General at the time of when he? Well, who was the deputy? Was that Yates? That would have been Yates at that time. And I guess, I don't know. There was really no reason why he shouldn't have trusted her to do it, but maybe they didn't have the same default. I guess that's the difference too. Is that Lynch wasn't publicly recused at the time, but maybe Comey felt she should have been. I think I've lost track of the timeline of when Lynch removed herself from all of that too, and when the various times at which Comey could have asked for a legal conclusion. It would be convoluted, but I mean, the question itself was convoluted too. I don't know. I suppose I'm only making my and Karen's head hurt even more. So we might move on then from that. Let's see, and also a comment here from Michael Musson, also amazing. He says that Trump wanted, or that Trump et al. Wanted to keep Comey quiet by firing him and removing any leverage that they had. That's true too. They should have guessed that things would only get worse and he would begin spilling the beans and explaining to everybody. Hey, you know he's going to want to tell everybody why he got fired, and you know that everybody's going to want to know because it's a 10-year term for the FBI director if they don't get fired. That's interesting. Tell us about why. Okay, I'll tell you. The president was trying to hide something. Oh, oops, that's bad. Well, didn't work out very well for Trump, and I'm not sad about it. We'll move on and check what else is happening on Twitter and what I might have actually remembered to store in pocket. I'll tell you what jumped out and I put aside Qatar. That's back in the news again. And let's see. What have I grabbed here? There's a couple of things that just recently in the last couple of minutes came through with regard to that, including, let's see. I saw something from the Hill's Twitter feed that says Qatar leader, the emir, I guess, rejects Trump's White House invitation. Is he trying to patch things over here? Ellen Mitchell writes at the Hill, the leader of Qatar reportedly has no plans to accept President Trump's invitation for a meeting at the White House until the country moves past an effort by several Persian Gulf neighbors to isolate the nation. It'll be very difficult for him to even make the trip with Saudi Arabian airspace closed to them. They have to fly around the Arabian Peninsula in order to get anywhere. I mean, it's doable, especially if you've got a private jet. You can do anything you like, but it's a big pain in the neck. Anyway, let's see. A Qatari official told Reuters on Thursday that the emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, would not be accepting Trump's invitation and has no plans to leave Qatar while the country is under a blockade. And that's probably politically wise as well. One diplomat in Kuwait told the news outlet that the feeling here is that it is going to take a while to fix. It's more about preventing things from getting worse. Trump spoke with the leader of Saudi Arabia on Tuesday to push for regional unity, and during a Wednesday phone call with the Emir of Qatar, he, quote, offered to help the parties resolve their differences, including through a meeting at the White House if necessary. No, thank you. That will be fine. A major diplomatic rift caused by the abrupt decision by several Arab countries to cut ties with Qatar after they accused its government of supporting terrorism has been called baseless by Qatar's leaders. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt announced Monday they were closing all land, sea, and air borders with Qatar. Several other countries followed suit. Oh, it hadn't even occurred to me until just now, thinking through this. It's a travel ban. And I guess this is the thing you can do as a dictatorship that Trump wishes he could do. They have just, with the snap of their fingers, cut all ties with Qatar and closed all land, sea, and air borders over the accusation that Qatar's government supports terrorism, which is exactly what Trump wishes he could do. Now, that must be burning him up, right? That with us, we have the politically correct Supreme Court and the various circuit courts of the United States, and they love to apply laws, and we're a government of laws and not men. But if we were a government of men, like particularly of me, we would have that travel ban. We would be able to cut off our air, land, and sea borders, at least with respect to people from particular countries. Now, I never targeted Qatar. I don't think Qatar was on any of the lists, by the way. And how interesting is that? Captain Obvious over here was going to save us from terrorism by excluding people from 7 majority Muslim countries, none of which were Qatar, and by the way, none of which were Saudi Arabia, which anybody who really, takes a good look at what was going on or remembers that 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi-ish anyway. But I don't know. I guess the old rules didn't apply either. Qatar did have, although I've seen varying conflicting reports that they have their Qatar Airlines offices in Trump Tower. Although I thought I saw the other day somebody claim on Twitter that their lease had expired there and they didn't renew it, and maybe that was it. But even so, if it's just a "what have you done for me lately" situation, the Sauds gave him a gold medal and spent $270,000 at his hotel. The Bahrainis likewise moved their National Day over to his hotel. So, he's wondering where's the latest contribution from Qatar. Anyway, interesting though that they are able to build their walls and impose their Muslim bans, or Qatar bans anyway, and that must make Trump bitterly jealous. Let's see. The countries cite Qatar's support for extremist groups such as Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and the Muslim Brotherhood, as well as its relations with Iran. Qatar Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani, and there's another Al Thani, you see, the family is hard at work up there, said the country has not been presented with a list of demands by the nations that cut diplomatic and transport ties, but said the dispute must be resolved peacefully. We have been isolated because we are successful and progressive. We are a platform for peace, he told reporters in the capital city of Doha. I don't know what they mean exactly by progressive, and not certainly what we mean, or if they thought they would get away with claiming what we mean by progressive, that ain't happening. I mean, we haven't really discussed much in the way of the demographics and the social structure of Qatar, because honestly, you would need a subject area expert for that. But the basics that you can glean from this is, like many of these other insanely wealthy monarchs and monarchies in the Persian Gulf region, on the Arabian Peninsula side anyway, you've got a tiny ruling class surrounded by a near slave population of about 5 times the size that does all the work of making it possible for the royals to drive around in Land Rovers and Cadillacs and whatnot and live an air-conditioned luxury lifestyle, while imported labor and, like I said, near slaves, people who are brought in ostensibly for work, and they do work, no doubt about that, but who, the story, you've seen it on TV enough times by now. They arrive in the country and the people who sponsor them immediately revoke their passports, and then they basically are living on subsistence, or in a subsistence situation where, so long as they show up to work as a, kitchen help in the hotel that the rich people stay in, and they don't complain, they'll get enough food to survive, and maybe a dime or two every once in a while that they can use to call home and assure their family that they're still alive, and implore them to please reach the, Filipino or Pakistani or Malaysian embassy and do something to get their passport back so they can come home, and it never comes to fruition. It's the same all over, and it's no different in Qatar. I don't know why. There's nothing progressive about that, obviously. But I think what they mean is we build a lot of buildings. That's progress, people say. So we're progressive. Anyway, they go on to say, we are not ready to surrender, and we will never be ready to surrender the independence of our foreign policy. The crisis likely has implications for the population of 2.7 million people, that's total, slaves included, and the 8,000 to 10,000 American military personnel, yes, at Al Udeid Air Base in Doha. And that brings us to another issue. I mean, we did take note of the fact that there's a significant American military presence there, and as I understand it, this Al Udeid Air Base in Doha is the major launching point. All of the airstrikes that sometimes we roll our eyes about and sometimes not, that we conduct against ISIS and Al-Qaeda occasionally, and we see written up in the papers as progress in our war against terror. A lot of them are flown out of this air base, and apparently the majority of the air war against ISIS operates from there. And I did see it mentioned yesterday that there was some possibility. MSNBC, as I recall, was the one reporting that it might have been possible that the president had zero idea that there were American troops in Qatar when he joined the party with Saudi Arabia and isolated them and attacked them for sponsoring terrorism, and that he had no idea that it might put our troops at risk or put our agreement to be able to use Qatari airspace and ground forces, well, not their ground forces, but to use their ground space for our base to conduct the air war against ISIS. And he may have had zero clue that that was even happening. And remember, this was, of course, the guy who said, "I'll be so good at the military, your head'll spin." How good is that at the military? I would think that's actually about as bad as you could possibly be at the military. Now, I will say, I don't know that I would have been aware off the top of my head of how many troops that there were in Qatar. And I suppose you might have been able to, get me I would have taken a moment's pause to think about that if you had said to me out of the blue, "Are there American troops based in Qatar?" I probably would have said, I would think so. I'm not positive that it's the case, because I'm not up on military operations. But then again, I'm not the president of the United States. Neither is he, but he's supposed to be, and he would have had briefings about these things, but he ignores that. And you can forget stuff from time to time, particularly exactly how many troops are there. But if ISIS is a huge priority for you, for real, and you really want to bomb the out of them, then at some point you probably would have been told, we do that, and we do that from the country of Qatar. But of course, he has no recollection of that, and he's so eager to please the Saudis, that he jumps right in without thinking. And even if he had thought, how much processing could he really do? All right. The rest of this article, let's see if it brings up some other interesting pieces. Qatar is a peninsula, of course, that shares its only land border with Saudi Arabia and relies heavily on its regional neighbors for imported food and supplies. Sheikh Mohammed insisted, however, that the country is not worried about a food shortage and said Iran was ready to help with securing food supplies. And that's not going to make their neighbors very happy. But by the way, I don't know whether that poses any issues for food supplies for our 8,000 to 10,000 service personnel who are there. I imagine that resupply to the air base, whether by air or by sea, will not be threatened in U.S. flagged carriers. And I doubt very much whether the Sauds or the Egyptians or the Bahrainis or the Emiratis are very interested in cutting off the food supply of American troops. That's probably not happening. But it will probably create some resupply difficulties, no doubt, or at least raise the price of resupplying the base considerably. Qatar and Iran already share a gas field in the Persian Gulf. Experts have expressed concerns that the regional dispute will push Qatar closer to Iran. And there's a good map out there that grabbed my attention originally, I think, when I picked up on these tweets. And there's it's a different piece also in the Hill, this one by Max Greenwood. Arab nations put dozens with Qatar ties on terror list. And we should find out exactly who is it that these people think the Qataris are funding, besides just generally saying, well, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, we'll see. But there's a great map of the what it says here is Qatar selected energy infrastructure. There's an oil pipeline that goes down the length of the Persian Gulf. It is, of course, directly across the Persian Gulf from Iran, but it's not a narrow strait as between them. Like I was thinking about, well, maybe that would explain some of their closeness with Iran, but in fact, it's the offshore gas field in the Persian Gulf, not land proximity. That is, there's the Straits of Hormuz, which are to the south and east of Qatar, where Iranian territory comes closest to Arabian Peninsula territory. That's not where Qatar is. They're not that close there. In fact, I guess they're at the one of the widest points of the Persian Gulf, which is not very wide. But if you take a look at this map, you can see the offshore gas field just basically sits in the middle of the Persian Gulf, and within the territorial waters, I guess, of Qatar, directly abut the territorial waters of Iran. It's just divided with an imaginary line, and so I guess they both mine this gas field. So there has to be some political cooperation as between the two of them, and I guess that's what's disturbing everybody else. Or maybe what's really disturbing everybody else is that they don't get a piece of that gas field, because Qatar, by virtue of being this peninsula that juts out of the eastern side of Saudi Arabia, they get to claim the territorial waters. And Bahrain, which is an island, which I guess also explains why it just hasn't been absorbed by the Sauds. It too, I guess because of where it sits, which is sort of in a, I don't know what, like a little finger of the Persian Gulf tucked in between. I mean, it's sort of sheltered on either side by Qatar and Saudi Arabia. So they don't appear to have any claim in that gas field. It's just not part of their territorial waters. Neither would the UAE, and I guess just by virtue of the way Qatar juts out like that, I wonder if that has to do with it. If they want a piece of that action, even if I don't think they would mind very much cooperating with the Iranians for splitting the revenue from a gas field. I think they could probably deal with that. But they don't seem to get a piece of it. I wonder if that's the total story there. I don't know what else is sitting out in the middle of the Persian Gulf. The other thing I thought about as a possibility, I guess, was it puzzled me a little bit that the Qatari government, having bought 19.5%, that 19.5% share in the Russian gas conglomerate Rosneft, and having structured that purchase as some sort of bridge or bailout loan for the Russian government, why would Trump be taking sides against, I guess, somebody that Putin would call a close friend, or at least ally, for having bailed him out? And would that cause tension as between Trump and Putin? How would they work that out? With Trump being Putin's puppet and all, that could cause a little bit of difficulty. But I guess here's just speculation. Since it is alleged that the plan is for the Russians to buy back that 19.5%, or at least the majority of it, from Qatar, if not all of it, I don't know. And the deal was made, Qatar was willing to do it for financial reasons because they anticipated making a great deal of money off of it. They would earn some return on this, and so it was worth their while. Russia, being run by Putin, who is more or less a mobster thug, why would he want to pay this premium? He wouldn't want to lose money on this deal, even if it does bail him out. But, he understands the concept of a loan. So maybe they get some return, just not as much as they were thinking of getting. I wonder if it drives the price down, or if isolating Qatar this way and exacerbating its own crisis, that will, raise the price of everything essentially and require them quickly, perhaps, to look to sell off any major assets that they have that they could liquidate relatively quickly and easily, like, say, 19.5% of Rosneft. If there were a willing buyer who would say, well, I see you're in trouble, I'm willing to take this off your hands, I'll see if I can scrape together the cash and buy it back for you, either for, if you're being kind, what you paid for it, or, gosh, I'm a little short of funds, and I'll buy it for considerably less. But they take, Qatar ends up taking the money because they've been cut off land and sea and air by everybody else. And now the cost of importing what they need to survive has skyrocketed. And having that $11 billion back would be a big help at this point. I'd be interested to see whether that had anything to do with it. Wouldn't that be an amazing favor for Trump to perform for Putin, allowing him to get that 19.5% of Rosneft back at fire sale prices? Well, we'll see. Purely speculation, but as you know, it would be irresponsible not to speculate at this point. Here's another comment. It's BJ Hutch on Twitter, who comments on these issue areas all the time. You can follow along. Lots of Western expats in Qatar, too. Engineers, teachers, other professionals, Brits, Europeans, and North Americans. We're being Canadian inclusive here. Multinational companies there too. Yeah, no doubt about that. Like most of the Persian Gulf Emirates, I guess. There are pockets of Western expats there. People who went there and worked for either the oil companies or for the U.S. government, or were contractors, and I'm sure lots of opportunities to do things like teach English to their upper classes, et cetera, or build an armed compound, for instance, and live in splendid isolation like Eric Prince does, whatever. So no doubt about that. So what are we saying? Is that why we ought to be concerned about it, or is that why you think the rest of the Persian Gulf, that's the case in the rest of the Persian Gulf too, isn't it? So I don't think it's like they're not jealous of their ability to milk funds out of more than their share of Western expats. I don't think that's the issue. All right. Well, anyway, I thought lots of interesting developments on the Qatar front, and it'd be very interesting if that Rosneft thing panned out and turned out to be, because it's otherwise sort of inexplicable. It may be that they sort of sold it to them at random, and there's a limited number of places where you're going to find people willing to put up $11.5 billion for a 20% stake in the Russian gas monopoly. It sounds like a good investment, but really getting involved with Russia is dangerous at best. And I don't know, there's a limited amount of places that you'll find people who are willing to drop that kind of cash, and Persian Gulf is probably one of them. All right. Let's see. Moving on from there, let's see what else we have floating about in Pocket that is worth bringing up. Yes. Another thing coming out of the Comey hearing, this one widely reported. Let's see, I've got the report here of, it's The Hill again. The Hill does a fantastic job promoting its material. One of the best, I think. And it's as simple as grabbing your attention by including photos in their tweets. I think it's genius. I've said it before. Comey told senators about possible third Sessions Russia meeting, according to this report. Max Greenwood, with this news, fired FBI Director James Comey, told lawmakers in the closed hearing on Thursday, closed portion of the hearing, that Attorney General Jeff Sessions may have had a third meeting with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak during the 2016 presidential race. The network reported, that was CNN, rather, being the network, reported that the information was based in part on intercepts of Russian-to-Russian communications, but sources told CNN it was possible that Kislyak was exaggerating the extent of the encounter. Sessions came under fire in February after it was revealed that he failed to disclose to the Senate 2 meetings with Kislyak in 2016 while he was a high-profile campaign surrogate for President Trump. Sessions later recused himself from the federal investigation as a result. Sessions said he had met with the ambassador in his capacity as a U.S. senator from Alabama and that the 2 reported meetings were his only ones with Kislyak during the campaign. So now apparently there could have been a third, but in all fairness, they say it's not clear that Kislyak wasn't simply exaggerating. I passed him in the hallway someplace, and he's like any other employee. He's got I guess reason to puff this stuff up. Putin wants to know, what are you doing to keep tabs on Trump and his campaign? Have you had any more contact with his high-ranking officials or surrogates yet? And the answer is no, but you realize, I passed Jeff Sessions in the hall and I said hi to him, and he knows who I am. So maybe we puff that up a little bit into a meeting. Or possibly there really was a meeting and he failed to disclose that, at which point you have to ask, how much more can the Senate tolerate from this guy? Every couple of weeks we find out that he committed perjury, and, it's one thing to wring your hands over it and say, gosh, really, perjury is perjury and we know what we're supposed to do with this, but can we really impeach the Attorney General on just that? Maybe he forgot, maybe that's what he says, I don't know. But if it keeps coming out, at some point you feel like you have to do something. But if you're a Republican, you just wave everything away, I guess, and never bother with it. But if it keeps piling up, it certainly looks bad. I didn't take a look at this other Max Greenwood piece that I had mentioned earlier, the Arab nations putting dozens with Qatar ties on the terror list, just to see who they were singling out here. If I can scroll down and see if there's anything worth mining from this. And they're really, actually, you know what? Well, I'm happy enough to report that there's just not any additional information in here, which is rather astounding, but at least it lets us off the hook and lets us move on to some other subjects. Let's comb through. There's also, of course, this information, which we hinted at earlier, that when Armando was singing the praises of the show, dang it, this is from the Hill too. I might as well just read you the Hill every day. But, that's the trade publication, and they cover a lot of these important bits. Parliamentarian threatens deadly blow to GOP healthcare bill. Alexander Bolton, one of their more experienced Hill reporters at the Hill, has this piece. The Senate parliamentarian has warned Republicans that a key provision in their healthcare reform bill related to abortion is unlikely to be allowed, raising a serious threat to the legislation. Yeah, of course, they stuck something about abortion in the AHCA over in the House, and the Senate Senate Republicans, of course, would like to keep it, but the Byrd rule creates problems. The parliamentarian, Elizabeth McDonough, has flagged language that would bar people from using new refundable tax credits for private insurance plans that cover abortion, according to Senate sources. You see what's going on here? If Republicans are forced to strip the so-called Hyde language, that for Henry Hyde, who used to be the annual sponsor of the Hyde Amendment, that would prohibit federal funds from being spent to pay for abortions, this time being adapted into, you're not allowed to use money from your tax credits to buy private insurance if the private insurer covers abortion, which is really enormously intrusive on the part of the federal government into private decisions and exercises dominion over tax dollars not paid to the federal government, but rather claimed as and kept in the pockets of private citizens. It's a really amazing thing. It's totally anti-conservative in its approach and makes the point that Thelonious was making the other day, that there's nothing conservative about today's conservatives. The idea that they would be screaming about big government and government getting in between you and your doctor, et cetera, and still back the idea. Oh, and of course the old stupid libertarian tinged ideas about things like taxation being theft and that it's your dollars and you get to control it and the government should have its hands off, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is still on its head over abortion. This is money that you save on your taxes, so you never turn it over to the federal government, although it is a refundable tax credit, and I guess that's supposed to give them some sort of claim on it. Like, otherwise you would be paying it to us in taxes, but you can keep it because it's a refundable tax credit instead. Okay, but you can keep it on condition that you not spend it on a private health insurance plan that covers one of the things that you want covered. But of course, they don't believe that that's health care. That's supposed to be their excuse for going ahead with it. Anyway, it doesn't matter to the parliamentarian or the Byrd rule. Here's where the problem arises. The so-called Hyde language essentially bars federal funds from being used to pay for abortions unless they do actually keep this thing in here. That I thought this was doomed to save the life of the mother or in cases of rape and incest. And I guess they've managed to keep those exceptions together. McDonough declined to comment for the article. Of course, she won't as parliamentarian. Unless a workaround can be found, conservative senators and groups that advocate against abortion rights are likely to oppose the legislation. I don't think so. They'll be upset about it. I don't know whether it's really a killing blow to the legislation or not. People will swallow an awful lot for a political victory. Republicans control 52 seats in the Senate. They can afford only 2 defections and still pass the bill, assuming Democrats are united against it. That would mean, of course, Vice President Pence breaking a 50-50 tie. Normally, controversial legislation requires 60 votes to pass the Senate. It really doesn't, of course, but it requires 60 votes to break a filibuster. But okay. Anyway, Republicans, as you know, are hoping to pass this bill with reconciliation, so they would only need the 50 plus the vote of the vice president. The catch is the legislation, of course, has to pass the 6-part test known as the Byrd Rule, and it's up to the parliamentarian to advise whether legislative provisions meet its requirements. The toughest requirement states that a provision cannot produce changes in government outlays or revenues that are merely incidental to the non-budgetary components of the provision. In other words, a provision passed under reconciliation can't be primarily oriented toward policy making instead of impacting the budget. Arguably, attaching Hyde language to the refundable tax credits is designed to shape abortion policy than to affect how much money is spent to subsidize health care coverage. The abortion language that conservatives want in the bill may run afoul of a precedent set in 1995 when then Senate parliamentarian Robert Dove ruled that an abortion provision affecting a state block grant program failed to meet reconciliation requirements, according to a source briefed on internal Senate discussions. In other words, they've been through this problem before, and prior parliamentarians have said, yeah, what you're really trying to do here is regulate abortion. And that's fine as a matter of policy, but you don't do policy in a reconciliation bill. The fact that there's actually revenue impacts doesn't outweigh the fact that what you're really trying to do here is restrict abortion. Do that if you want in a regular bill. That would be subject to filibuster, unless nuclear option, but that's up to you. This part is up to me, and I say no. So it has come up. There could well be a challenge, one lawmaker said. However, the problem is surmountable, and argues, this lawmaker does that there's a way around it. One possibility would be to change the form of assistance to low-income people by changing it from a refundable tax credit to a subsidy filtered through an already existing government program that also restricts abortion services, such as the Federal Employee Health Benefits Program or Medicaid. A second Republican senator said discussions on the topic are ongoing. Negotiators picked up the pace of their discussions with the parliamentarian after a Congressional Budget Office updated score on the House passed bill in late May. President Trump is pushing the Senate to pass its version of the legislation by July 4th, or that is before their July 4th holiday recess. If Republican leaders are forced to strip the Hyde language from the health care bill and can't find an alternative way to seal off insurance tax credits or subsidies from abortion services, they would, it is alleged, lose the support of anti-abortion rights groups, which would be a devastating blow. We've made it clear in a lot of conversations and some letters that any Republican replacement plan has to be consistent with the principles of the Hyde Amendment, said David Christensen, Vice President of Government Affairs at the Family Research Council. You know them. Abortion is not health care, as they put it, and the government should not be subsidizing elective abortion. So that's their position. Christensen predicted that activists would be up in arms if abortion services aren't barred under the bill. If the Byrd rule were to be an obstacle to ensuring the GOP replacement plan and the Senate does not subsidize abortion, that's something that would be a serious problem for us and the pro-life community, he said. Republican senators who were thought to be safe votes to support the Republican leadership's repeal and replace plan may suddenly shift to undecided or opposed. Would that be a deal killer? I'd have to think about it. I'm inclined to think it would be, said Senator Jim Inhofe of Oklahoma. Senate Finance Committee Chairman Orrin Hatch, who has jurisdiction over the tax credits in the health care bill, acknowledged it could be tough to pass the bill without the anti-abortion language. I think a lot of people do think that's essential, he said. I think a lot of people do think that, but I think on the spot, under pressure from the president and under a deadline and under the threat of once again being denied the win on repeal and replace. We're going to do it so quickly, people. It's going to be so easy. It's so simple. You just do it, right? And to have it fail again would be enormously damaging. And I have a feeling that they'll just say, this is the best deal we could get at the time. And the number of abortions you're talking about is minimal, and we'll be attacking that through other vehicles. You can count on us to be voting on that all the time. And it's likely true, although that stuff will get filibustered. But I think it's survivable, and I think they know that, and I think they'll probably come around. My prediction, I think it's not a very risky one, is, as other people have already come out with this prediction, is that they will just try and force this thing through, mostly sight unseen. Claire McCaskill's been raising a firestorm over the fact that there's not even going to be, just like in the House, no hearings on this thing. Which flies among the Republican base because they believe for some reason that there were no hearings on Obamacare and that it was crammed down our throats. Why do they believe that? Because everybody went on television and said it's been crammed down our throats. And it wasn't. There were years and years and years of deliberations and hearings, but I don't know. They don't remember it because they weren't in any of them. So, the question is, can they get this thing done before the July 4th recess? They want to get it done before the recess for a number of reasons, not the least of which is they're, once again, afraid to go home without this thing done. They don't want their members to be subjected to more public pressure. And although they'll do everything that they can to avoid any town hall meetings on it where people can actually yell at them about it, they'll still be facing protests and fielding calls and just basically being miserable about having to swallow this piece of garbage up until it's done. And then for a little while afterwards, too. But the July 4th recess is coming up. I guess the issue is they still haven't finished, even in secret, writing the bill down in order to hand over to the CBO for scoring. Although they're talking about various of the provisions with the parliamentarian, the CBO, it is guessed, will need about 2 weeks to score the thing, and that will leave them with 1 week left to pass this thing before the July 4th recess. The week of June 26th, I think, is the Monday of that week. And then keeping in mind that the way things usually work in Congress is for a recess, they want to be out of there on Thursday. So that would give them really, and they're very rarely in session for the whole day on Monday. The House tends to go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then, about 4 o'clock Thursday, they're out of there. The Senate tends to stretch things out a little bit. They will likely, if they need the time, they will happily convene Monday morning, and they'll stay through to Friday. So they would have the better part of 5 days to get this thing over and done with. I don't think that they care whether or not it's finalized with respect to if there are any differences in the bill, whether the House gets a vote or not, if the Senate were to pass it. You've seen the Republicans willing to have a party based on the House alone passing this thing. So I don't have any doubt that they would be very happy if the Senate could do the same. So the next 2 weeks, the CBO will be scoring the thing. And there has to be, the people who are active on this bill, and we all should be, are exactly right. And you will see them imploring you to call your senators, to just call them every day and load them down with your opposition to the bill. A last-ditch effort to try and pull people off of the bill. And it may only take one or two more to move off the bill, particularly if it turns out that some of them are actually upset about these anti-abortion provisions not making it through the Byrd rule test and are serious about withholding their votes. I doubt that they are, but you might as well put them under tremendous pressure. It may be that combined with the pressure from people like the Family Research Council and regular people who just don't think the bill is a good idea, might be enough to move them off of it. So listen to your activist friends when they say it's time to blast Capitol Hill with your calls again, and do participate in that effort. So we'll see likely them try and move this thing to the floor to meet their deadline during the week of the 26th. They can do it. Of course, reconciliation not only protected from the filibuster in terms of the number of votes it would take procedurally to get to final passage, but also time limited. And in fact, that is the protection that they have from the filibuster. They don't need 60 votes for cloture on the bill, not because it says you only need 50 in the law, but because there's a time limit in the law. You see how that operates? That's one of the important things. One of the things we give to you about in our examination of procedure on a show like this one, just like Armando was saying, the fact that the Budget Act says that reconciliation can only be debated for a certain number of hours in the Senate. And I think reconciliation, is it 20 hours for reconciliation? Because it caps debate, there's no need to invoke cloture on it. By law, debate can only last 20 hours. And so you don't need cloture. If you don't need cloture, you don't need the 60 votes. If you don't need the 60 votes, it can be passed with a simple majority. Just as any bill can be passed with a simple majority, the 60 is, again, to call an end to the debate. The debate has to end in order for you to then call a vote on it. You can only use the floor for one thing at a time. It's that simple. So I believe they're limited to 20 hours of debate on reconciliation. So what can Democrats and other opponents of the bill do? Not too much. There's going to be a vote. But in these time-limited bills, reconciliation is just one of them. The budget resolution is another. And, of course, the same statute governs both. The Budget Act puts a time limit of 50 hours on the budget, 20 hours on reconciliation. I think it's like 10 hours for any conference reports on either of those two measures. But we're not at that point yet. So what can you do with that stuff? Well, it puts a time limit on debate, but the Senate still recognizes the right of senators to offer unlimited numbers of amendments to those bills. It's just that after 50 hours or 20 hours, the time allotted for debating those amendments is gone. And so you will have, as you frequently do on budget bills, a possibility of another vote-a-rama, as they call it. That is, you can file all the amendments you want. It's just that the debate time is over with. And again, the statutory limitation is on debate, not on time spent on consideration of the bill. Now, debate is an important part of consideration of a bill, but it's not everything. Some of what counts as consideration of a bill is voting on amendments. So here's what happens. The 20-hour limit gets hit, and you still have 100 amendments pending because people filed all sorts of things for various reasons. Some because they actually believe in the amendments, some because they want to set up an election issue, a messaging amendment, some because they simply want to make the process as complicated and annoying as possible. That sometimes happens. Some are gotcha amendments, whatever. You see it all the time on budgets. You don't see it quite as much on reconciliation bills, but that's because you see reconciliation bills less frequently than budget bills. But the dynamics, the procedure sets up the same way. The 20 hours ends, and if there are pending amendments, they have to be considered. They have to be voted on or dispensed with in some way. And a votorama is how they do it. Basically, at that point, they just say, all right, you got every vote is 15 minutes, the way it usually is. But you can't debate the amendments. They call up the amendment and we just vote on it. Now, usually they can sometimes work out a unanimous consent agreement where they say, all right, well, we'll give everybody literally a 1 minute to introduce what is this amendment and trying to explain it. And then 1 minute to any opponents who want to say why you should vote no on this amendment. And then we'll have the vote, and we'll try and strictly limit it to the 15 minutes, but it sometimes bleeds over. And then they immediately, once they're finished with that vote, just go to the next one. And somebody says for a minute what's in the bill or what's in the amendment. Somebody says why it sucks. Then they go to another 15-minute vote. And they just do this over and over and over until they dispense with all of these amendments. So, you'll do about 3 to 4 amendments an hour if things move slowly. Very often when they're actually looking to find ways of cooperating and move through the votorama quickly, there will be a lot of unanimous consent agreements to either dispense with certain things on voice vote, which they can do instantly and not have to waste 15 minutes voting on it. They will consider amendments, if they're closely related, they will consider them en bloc, that is to say all at once. That requires a unanimous consent agreement, not all of them at once, but 5, 6, 10, 15 of them if they want all at once. And they do as much as they can to cut down the amount of time spent voting, but still a votorama can take you 24 hours. It can take you around the clock, and they'll just stay in session until they dispense with all of these things. Now, if you're entering a situation wherein, for instance, let's say one party is interested in making this process last as long as possible, and they really don't want to get to a vote on this reconciliation bill. There's nothing they can do to prevent us from getting to a vote, but they can make it take an awful long time. So I guess the question is, can you eat up the entire week of the 26th of June with votorama amendments or procedural motions or what have you? It will be enormously taxing to do something like this, because everybody will have to stay more or less 24/7 until the amendments are dispensed with. And it is possible to see hundreds of amendments offered. I don't know if I've ever seen that situation on a reconciliation bill, but certainly on the budget. It's very common of late to see 400, 500 amendments offered to a budget. And I guess, technically speaking, you could do the same thing with a reconciliation bill and try and make it clear that it will be physically punishing to try to finish with this bill, or possibly they might even, I guess if you file 10,000 amendments, physically impossible to get it done before July 4th recess. So, that doesn't really cure anything because, well, for one thing, they might say, all right, we'll come back after July 4th and pass it then. No skin off our nose. We're not going to have any town hall meetings anyway. Or Mitch McConnell could say, I wasn't going anywhere for July 4th, and now neither are you. We're going to stay. You want to file 10,000 amendments? Fine. We'll stay literally through July 4th and through the entire week of the July 4th holiday, voting on your stupid amendments over and over and over, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day until we're done. And then we'll pass our stupid bill, and you'll be exhausted and you'll have lost. So, some question as to whether or not the appetite for that actually exists on the Democratic side. But if the goal is simply to see if you can push it to after the July 4th recess, if they say, fine, We'll deal with the rest of these amendments when we come back. Everybody go home. And then there's one more opportunity before final passage for people to pressure their senators at home and in person. That is maybe the last-ditch effort to try and kill this thing before it gets passed. So it's worth considering, perhaps worth giving a try. Your senators will have to wonder, they'll have to answer the question of, are they up to dealing with that kind of crazy situation for that long? It'll be very tough, but it'll be just as taxing on Republicans. So I guess look out for it and see whether there's any indication of any interest in it. That'll wrap up our procedural update. Let's see, what other things might we discuss in the closing minutes of the show, and in fact the closing minutes of the week. Another interesting story. It's all the Hill all day long here. Look at it. I really have to pay some more attention to diversifying my sources here, but I love to grab these things off of Twitter, and these things make splashy headlines. Exclusive, Scott Wong writes here for the Hill. GOP lawmaker talked stocks with colleagues. That seems kind of interesting, something to keep an eye on, perhaps if you live in the district of Representative Chris Collins, a Republican in New York. Apparently has boasted about how much money he's made for other members of Congress, yeah, right, maybe himself, by tipping them off to an Australia-based pharmaceutical company in which he is the largest stockholder. Gee whiz, he made money on this too. Two GOP lawmakers told The Hill. Collins, President Trump's chief defender and unofficial spokesman on Capitol Hill, really, told a group of House Republican colleagues over dinner, everybody's having dinner these days, over dinner earlier this year that he had urged colleagues to invest in innate immunotherapeutics and made them plenty of money in the process, said one GOP lawmaker who was present for the conversation. He said that he's made members money, the GOP lawmaker told The Hill. Members of Congress, a reporter asked. Yeah, on his stock tip, the lawmaker replied. They don't even know what they're saying these days. If you get in early, you'll make a big profit, Collins reportedly told another group of House Republicans last summer. He's the majority stockholder in this. Amazing. That's according to a second GOP lawmaker who was part of the same 2012 class as Collins. Asked if he ever heard Collins brag about making colleagues money, the second lawmaker replied, I've heard those kinds of phrases. This is problematic. Collins has already won negative headlines after reporters in January overheard him bragging about how many millionaires I've made in Buffalo the past few months, actually. He says the Buffalo News reported that many in the city's business elite had bought stock in the drug company after hearing from Collins. Now the focus is shifting to Collins' conversations with colleagues on Capitol Hill. The dinner discussion on Capitol Hill wasn't the only time Collins brought up the Australian company in Washington. Half a dozen Republican lawmakers interviewed for this story said they have heard Collins talking up innate immunotherapeutics at informal settings on the Hill. A third GOP lawmaker told The Hill that Collins personally pitched him on buying innate stock, though the lawmaker didn't take his advice. In an extended interview in the Speaker's lobby just off the House floor, Collins categorically denied that he had ever recruited members of Congress to buy innate stock or bragged about making them money. I never once talked about that. He's just like Trump, isn't he? No wonder he's his chief spokesman on the Hill. I never encouraged anyone to buy the stock, ever, Collins said. I've presented opportunities in Buffalo. I've said, here's an opportunity I just happen to have heard about, just this weird opportunity that's out there, I guess. I've heard this, here's an opportunity. Listen, read, study, make a decision. That's the only thing I ever did, and that was in Buffalo. As if that makes it any better. Collins, whose net worth is as much as $66 million, according to OpenSecrets.org, making him one of the wealthiest members of Congress, said he has no regrets about talking about innate to colleagues and others in Washington, and he said it was no secret that people who invest in the company probably will get rich. Innate's drug just completed a Phase 2B clinical trial, and the firm hopes to sell off the product later this year, Collins said, so that it'll cost 5,000 times more than it really costs to make it. There are a dozen big pharma companies interested, Collins said. I think this drug could be on the market in 2 years, potentially, which is life-saving and family-saving. That's a new one, family-saving. I talk about it at every turn, just like you talk about your kids hitting a home run and your daughter getting into law school. He continued, it's all the same, right? just making me lots of money, but whatever. And all the things I've done in my business career, I'm most proud of this. Several House colleagues said Collins' constant talk about the company is inappropriate for an elected official. One lawmaker who hails from the Midwest said he recalls Collins bragging about how much money he's made from Innate during a lunch with colleagues. Again, food. One's personal wealth is a private matter where I come from, said the source. That's not the issue, of course. A fifth lawmaker from Western New York, a Republican, had mentioned Innate, they're talking about him. Okay. Collins had mentioned Innate in numerous conversations, including during an official meeting in the Capitol about finding a cure for cancer. While Collins had done nothing wrong, the lawmaker said, his remarks at the meeting raised some eyebrows in the room. It's not clear that he hasn't done anything wrong. Anytime you talk about business interests, you always have to be sensitive how that it's portrayed by others. You may be giving the most innocent and honest assessment, but it's how people perceive it. Things sometimes get lost, the fifth lawmaker told The Hill. If I was on the other side of receiving that, I could see where people would say, that's a little too close. Collins first invested in the company, which has developed a drug to fight advanced multiple sclerosis, about 15 years ago. He said he'd raised money for the company during tough times and has earned a spot on the board of directors. Golly gee. Amazing. Last August, he purchased an additional 4 million shares. On January 27th, the stock hit an all-time high of $1.83 per share, but was trading at 74 cents per share on Wednesday. Not terribly unusual. House ethics investigators last month began probing Collins for his role in recruiting investors to buy stock in the Australian firm after several complaints were filed alleging, and here's the problem, insider trading, because that's what it is. The Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge, or STOCK Act, passed by Congress in 2012, explicitly bars members of Congress from trading stocks using insider information. And of course, that's what's going on here. So just another side story. The corruption is kind of top to bottom with these guys. And who knows, maybe those of you listening in the Rochester area have a particular interest in what this guy is doing, or maybe other Western New York area Republicans he might be close to. Interesting. A little bit different way of closing out our Friday. It's not Trump and it's not Qatar. Keep an eye on him over the weekend. It'll be interesting to see what the president does with his Twitter machine and what kind of trouble he gets himself in. We'll be back on Monday. Monday, of course, slated for refrigerator repair here, but we'll try and relocate the radio broadcasting studio, such as it is, so that we can bring you uninterrupted coverage of whatever crazy crap it is that Donald Trump starts tweeting about over the weekend, and anything else that might erupt as well. Plus all the stories we haven't been able to bring you. Speaking of which, it is now Friday. Oh, I missed my chance to speak Italian yesterday in summarizing what comes up next on the after show, but here's what comes up today. Russian hackers using Britney Spears' social media to pass coded instructions to spies in the United States and other countries. A little bit of beautiful mind there, I guess. Russia set to seize U.S. property in Moscow if their spy compounds in Maryland and Long Island aren't returned. And Comey hinted during his open hearing that both Attorney General Jeff Sessions and Vice President Mike Pence are targets of counterintelligence probes because of undisclosed Russian contacts. Yikes! What about on the last half? Well, for today, after a decade of negotiations, the Trump administration just refused to sign another multilateral agreement in Paris, this time to combat tax evasion by companies operating in multiple countries. I wonder why he would be interested in that.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All of that and more. Here's another story for you, by the way. Scientists have developed fluorescent dyes to identify counterfeit whiskey. That's an interesting problem. By the way, the bad news there is you found out your whiskey is genuine, but now it's full of dye. Well, only do it to a portion of it. That's my advice. Stay tuned. This is my other advice for the after show coming up next.